For as many videos that can be made about how a hero stops holding back and beats the shit out of a villain, at some point on some level you're gonna find that one villain you're just gonna feel bad for, specifically for how much you resonate with that character. You're gonna realize that these villains are not just glorified punching bags. That brutalized villain is a person too, with a backstory and a specific reason for why they are the way they are. But whether they are complete psychos or people that had everything to lose and simply lost it all, most of the time a regular person isn't gonna think about a villain's backstory. They're gonna see you as a monster. And I mean, who can blame them? If I got thrown off a moving train by Doc Ock, obviously me and many others are gonna see Doc Ock through that lens forever. I mean, you're crazy otherwise. But it's because of that, right? That no one ever thinks to actually look behind the curtain, to at the very least understand why and maybe start a dialogue with them. Try to help them in some way, shape, or form. Most villains are not always completely 100% evil. There's always two sides to every coin, and sometimes they're just immensely misunderstood and broken. And I really want to add to this by mentioning a few villains specifically on Spidey's roster, because these guys have it the worst of all. Simply put, they are never allowed to change, which is arguably a fate as cruel as Spider-Man's or even worse. Take the Sandman, for instance, who is not inherently evil per se, but sheerly a product of the cards he was dealt. I mean, imagine turning into literal fucking sand and then getting vacuumed by a kid in a spider costume. This dude had a life. He wasn't an upstanding citizen by any means, but now the dude can't eat. I don't exactly know how or if he can use the bathroom, and if he touches water, he turns into mud. That's miserable. So on some level, I can't blame him for being a villain at times. I mean, next to Carnage, this dude looks like a saint. Yet it's not as if Flint Marko hasn't tried to be good at some point or another. He was on the Avengers at one point, for crying out loud. I didn't even know this until making this video. Flint has had his moment in the sun. Wait a minute. If they're at a beach right now, is Spidey sitting on Sandman? And if Sandman is sitting on sand, would that mean he's sitting on himself? I'm sorry, that just kind of boggled my mind a bit. But Flint, at a point, viewed everything he ever did in his final moments as mistake after mistake. But the only good thing he ever did in life was the endless days he'd spend with his alcoholic mother at the beach making sandcastles. And in the end, Flint goes out as a somewhat good and honest man, only to become fucking Glass Man. You see what I mean now? Sandman isn't necessarily a bad person, he just has bad luck. I know you get it. Then there's the Lizard, a character that desperately wants to have his old life back, to hug his family, to be whole again, yet is cursed to watch them from afar. In certain stories, it's this craving to be whole, this desperation, that leads Kirk Connors to make mistakes he can never take back as the Lizard, and be forced to live with them forever. Like eating his one and only son. That shows how the Lizard is cursed to always be a monster no matter how hard he may try to escape it. And finally, a villain I felt very connected to these last few months is the Rhino. Arguably one of Spider-Man's simplest villains ever, who is often referred to be just a quote-unquote big dumb guy, who's a lot more than that when you look closer. Just a bit more. Okay, maybe a little bit more? Okay, good. What inclined me to take a deep dive was really during the Back in Black era of Spider-Man. By this point in Peter's story, he's lost his secret identity. He's hunted like you wouldn't believe by the government. His aunt is in critical condition, and Captain America, a huge mentor to Peter has been assassinated. Everything bad that could happen has happened. So it's while grieving over the insurmountable loss that has come Peter's way, over his parents' grave, his spider sense goes off. Instinctively rushing in for a fight, Peter strikes at the rhino just simply talking over his mother's grave. Initially, Peter believes that the rhino is there to try and kill him, only that could be further from what the rhino was actually there to do. And it's while the two are flustered from the fighting that the rhino accidentally steps on his beloved mother's grave. Spidey, indirectly causing this, sends the rhino into a fury, screaming at him for just wanting to be alone, but now more than ever has a reason to kill him. Despite knowing that Peter was in the wrong for just jumping into fighting the rhino, it doesn't stop Peter from absolutely pummeling him. Yet the rhino, to me at the very least while reading this, felt like an actual human being for once. No gimmicks or one-liners. Rhino felt like a regular human being that would go on a complete tirade for the respect of his mother, shouting to the hilltops that he wasn't even bothering anyone. He just wanted to be alone, but that there's always something or someone preventing that. In this case, it's Peter that's the disruption. So the rhino targets all his pain and grief at Spider-Man till either Spider-Man or himself is completely down for the count. So after reading this, I went, okay, hold on. I think there's more to the Rhino than I've ever let myself see before. Before, I really only ever knew him for his video game or TV show appearances to be just this big dumb brute that likes to barrel towards Spider-Man no matter what's in the way. And while most of that is still true, in most comics, the Rhino is a bit more than that. Take the Brand New Day era of Spider-Man, for instance. See, after so many years living life as the notorious Rhino, Alexei had had enough of the life, seeking only to pay for his crimes now. Getting skinned and sent to Rikers, Alexei would have so many opportunities to fall back into his old ways. But at every turn, Alexei would deny. Eventually, at a certain point, on good behavior and an abundance of inmates being sent to Rikers, Alexei would be set free to live life as an upstanding citizen, hopping off the bus and waltzing into the nearest cafe, with one foot in front of the other. The waitress working at the time would slide a plate of cake and a glass of coffee onto his table, exclaiming that she knows Alexei has just been released from prison and knows how everything will go from here. Alexei will enjoy the meal, he'll pay for his meal, and by the end, Alexei will fall in love with her. Admittedly, Alexei is amused by the waitress, but ultimately gives her the silent treatment. He pays for his food and heads back out into the night rain. As time keeps on, Alexei at every turn is faced with many difficulties, such as finding a proper house to live in, a job, and a way to forget about his old life. It's at a certain point that Alexei is faced with an ultimatum. Does Alexei go back to his old life as the Rhino, or does he stick to the path of trying to be more than the animal? Accidentally bumping into the waitress from before, now crying over the loss of her job, Alexei serves as a shoulder to cry on for her, expressing to her that all he's ever known is to stick with one thing in life and move one foot in front of the other. As she then introduces herself as Oksana, with Alexei offering to buy her dinner, but warning her not to expect him to fall in love with her. And yet, Alexei couldn't be more wrong, because Alexei would fall completely in love with Oksana from that moment on. So Alexei, now living life no longer the Rhino and happily wedded to his loving wife Oksana had later taught Alexei that there could be more to life than smashing through walls as the Rhino, that Alexei could be more than an animal. So Alexei moved on. However, in Alexei's retirement, a brand new Rhino would pop out of the woodwork looking to prove himself superior. Terrorizing a rally for Mayor JJ searching for Alexei, the new Rhino challenges Alexei to see who the real Rhino is and shall remain. So Alexei faces this new Rhino and tells him that if he wants his skin, they shall face against one another where everything began at midnight and settle it like beasts. With that, the new Rhino bursts out of the scene. Initially, Spider-Man lashes out at Alexei for egging on this new Rhino, yet Alexei tells Spider-Man that he made a promise to Oksana to never be the Rhino again, willing to be a coward to keep that promise. Yet the new Rhino could always find them again, right? So Alexei demands Spider-Man to make them both disappear forever. Mayor JJ immediately puts Alexei and Oksana into the Witness Protection Program, and it's through Alexei and Oksana having to say goodbye to everything they've known that Oksana is understandably frustrated with the life Alexei has led up to this point, where Alexei tells Oksana that so long as they are together, their united love will shine through their darkest moments. It's in this moment that we get this very sincere and heartfelt moment between the two, where Alexei hands her a love letter he wrote himself. As the letter goes,
Dearest Oksana, I cannot begin to tell you how proud I am of you on this day, or how impossibly lucky I am that you have chosen me to be a part of it. To be a part of your life. You inspire me to be so much more than I once was. You have turned an animal into a man, and I love you for it, with all my heart. Congratulations on your special day. Love, Alexei.
Later that same night, as they're escorted through the city, at first it almost seems like they're gonna make it out of New York scot-free, until the new Rhino, hip to Alexei's cowardice, attacks the police escort, leading to Alexei having to watch the light fade from Oksana's eyes. The man Oksana had helped Alexei to become was now gone. With nothing left and feeling nothing other than unbridled rage, Alexei would slip back into his old ways like a glove, blaming Spider-Man for the death of Oksana before reuniting himself with his inner animal. Spider-Man attempts to stop the new Rhino, but this effort is utterly fruitless, as Alexei, now the Rhino once again, faces against the new Rhino and thrashes this new Rhino like a complete force of nature, splitting the man in two, but not before he can say goodbye to the one and only woman he ever loved. Now, my brief summation sort of does an injustice, because I believe with an absolute certainty that you will miss out on all of the nuance that this story has by not reading it for yourself. It's Amazing Spider-Man number 625 for those that are curious. Now, I said at the beginning that I could relate to the Rhino even more so as of late, and that's because I've suffered from loss as of recently. I'm in a much better spot than I was weeks ago, but I read this a few days after everything happened and deeply resonated with Alexei's rage, his fury. Here he had someone who deeply cared for him, that showed Alexei he could be more than some buffoon in a Rhino costume. Through Oksana, Alexei became the kind of man he never thought possible, and just as they were both about to reach the end of the long dark tunnel that had been Alexei's life, his other life pulls him right back in, ripping away the only thing he ever loved in the process, leaving him wanting nothing more than to recede back to his old ways and desperately try anything he could to forget Oksana. But no matter where Alexei tries to go or run through, he can never forget about the love he had and was stolen from him. Now, I don't want to go into incredible detail, but I will say that I now know what this feels like. Not necessarily the being a Rhino part of things, but the part of wanting to shut out all the things and memories that remind me of those I've lost. Wanting to be angry at the world for taking away someone that meant everything to me. Wanting to tear apart everything around me and succumb to my inner fury, and curse others for the things they have that I've lost. But in the end, deep down, I know that's not what they'd want. But God, does that not make it any easier, does it? The anger is still there, granted, but while it's there is also some kind of bittersweetness. Like, I'm glad that I have memories to look back on, to remember the best moments, but I'm also saddened that I can no longer make any new ones. I try to look for them in anything, and reading other stories, I found that the Rhino does the exact same. However, as much as I or the Rhino try to look for them, you can't exactly remove those memories from your life or the love you shared for them. You're just sort of forced to live out your life carrying that weight forever. That's until Ben Reilly, now with a newfound fascination for Egyptian fashion, hits the Rhino's line about giving him back the one person he's ever truly loved. Alexei gets the chance to be with the one he almost lost forever, and now doesn't take a single moment for granted, hanging on every moment as if it could be their last, just waiting for the pin to drop, thinking about what life would look like without them in it. And I'll tell you something, you're never really ready for when it happens, because without her, Alexei has nothing. So you can only imagine the state Alexei is left when Oksana's ripped away from him all over again. Alexei is left less than nothing. Left with this unending pain and rage, with Oksana gone, and the best part of himself gone as well, all over again. What does Alexei do with it all? How does Alexei move forward?
Pain, just emptiness, pain, rage. It won't stop. Why can't I make it stop?
You don't, but it means we're alive. And if she were here, she'd want you to.
But she's not. She's gone. And with her, part of me is gone too. The best part of me. Oksana.
Alexei, listen to me. You're wrong. I've lost people too. But that pain, that hurt, that means they are still there. You carry them with you in everything you do. That means you honor them, Alexei, by being the person they would want you to be. Ugh.
But how? How do I go on?
Same way you always have. Like a rhino. You put your head down and move forward. Just keep moving forward. And if you can, maybe I can too.
By living every day under the notion that Alexei can at the very least try to keep going by being the person Oksana would want him to be, Alexei in some way is able to maybe not completely move on or let go of his anger, but he can at least accept that Oksana would want him to try, and that's a thought that can lift him out of the darkness. Something I wanted to add that I really appreciate is how much Spidey understands Rhino's pain in this instance more than anyone. In this comic, Peter has just had to watch those he's lost in his life as Spider-Man die all over again, and instead of using all of his rage and targeting it towards the Rhino to blow off some steam, Peter instead tries everything he can to calm him down, to be a friend to Rhino in his most earth-shattering moment. I read this and fucking cried, man. And I don't give a fuck if you call me a crybaby, This is a comic I needed to read for myself in one of my worst moments. And it felt like a hand reaching down on my shoulder to tell me that I was gonna be okay. Rhino to me felt like the most perfect representation of my grief at the time. I can only hope that if you're watching this and don't just have this on to sleep to, that you have something that can heal you as well. Something that can make you feel less like the world is ending and more like the world is okay for just a moment and everything just makes sense. Sort of like what that kid from the first Fast and Furious movie says to Brian when he's astounded that he knows so much about cars, and he says that he sucked at pretty much everything because he could never pay attention with ADD, but the one thing that made sense was always engines. They're that one thing to him in the whole wide world that calms him down. I hope all of you guys have what that dude has. Or had, I guess I should say, because he fucking dies.
Make your own goddamn pop.
Now, if you can, I'd like you to spare a bit more of your time and dream with me for a moment. I want you guys to come on a little ride and listen to the Rhino's saddest story ever written, in my opinion. I say this because the state of the Rhino in this story is depressing as all hell, like Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler type of depressing. This story is meant to show what the Rhino's life looks like without Spider-Man in it, how the Rhino is taken advantage of for quick cash, how he's treated by others like he's stupid, and more importantly, how alone a life like Alexi's can look. People laugh at him either behind his back or directly in his face. He spends countless nights drinking in his basement, listening to polka records while blowtorching his Rhino suit so he doesn't smell like shit, and the Rhino searches for anything to make himself feel good. To the point the Rhino lets women he knows can give a rat's ass about him use him for his money and drinks to just feel less alone than he already immensely is. Now, I know that Rhino isn't exactly going to recite to me the Pythagorean theorem or anything, but there is a consistent level of villains or goons that he gets looped in with from time to time that regard him as a person that has the lights on, but no one's quite home. However, I'd argue that he's not even that dumb. If anything, I'd say he's emotionally intelligent and a dude that doesn't know how to really function in a real-world setting at all. There's many stories where the Rhino becomes exhausted facing up against heroes and losing, that he slips into sheer depression. I mean, just imagine how miserable your life could become, constantly wishing you were more, but could never be. And then on top of that, you have a goddamn Rhino suit fused to your skin that you can never take off. That also manages to make anything except smashing through walls the absolute hardest thing on earth. I'd want to die if this was my life. Which inevitably leads the Rhino to feel like the only way he can feel happiness, to feel peace, is to just end it all. It's at the point of no return that the Rhino mocks smart people's stupid laughter, or their stupid wine glasses, or their clothes, or their fancy music. Stupid things that require you to be smart to enjoy them. And then it hits the Rhino. He can make himself smart. See, Alexei had to be placed into the suit and experimented on by scientists to become the Rhino a long time ago. Emigrating from Russia to the United States and willing to do anything to bring his family over as well, Alexei was an easy target for these evil scientists right here. With his natural size, strength, and lack of awareness to the situation, he would allow himself to be experimented on to become an unstoppable henchman. Scientists, under the impression that his lack of education would keep him somewhat obedient for them, would send the Rhino on a mission to kidnap JJ's son and pilfer various military secrets. However, the Rhino did end up rebelling against the scientists, realizing that he didn't need to work for others with the power he possessed, leading to a dramatic face-off between the Rhino and Spidey.
Mock me, will you? You'll live to regret that. Nobody has ever made a fool of the Rhino.
No? What about the clown who designed those goofy threads of yours?
I'll get you off that perch, you stupid smirking string bean.
Why didn't you just ask? I was leaving anyway. So returning to the people that grafted the Rhino suit to Alexei's skin, Rhino poses the idea to the scientists to give him some dignity, to make the Rhino smart. At first, the scientists think that the Rhino is just crazy and that this is just some midlife crisis he'll break through. But when the Rhino expresses how much this means to him, scientists undergo an experiment to make him smart only ever conducted on chimps. It's a brutal process that ruptures his brain and, at first glance, seems sort of fruitless, until arriving to see Stella, whom Rhino had been hired to protect, uses an idiom and begins correcting her boyfriend's grammar. Taking offense to this, the boyfriend sets Rhino up to get payback for the embarrassment and involves Spider-Man. Only through the Rhino's brain upgrade, he manages to take down Spider-Man relatively quick, after which Alexei figures out that the boyfriend had set him up, so Alexei steals his girl. And as the days go on, Alexei's intelligence vastly improves. Alexei falls in love, he writes his first novel, and becomes the kingpin of crime. It's very silly, I know, but just roll with it. He's having a blast for once. Be happy for him. But with all the fancy music and dinners, everything comes second to Stella. Yet as time continues to pass on with the Rhino's ever-growing intelligence, the love Alexei has for Stella starts to fade. Stella can no longer keep up with his ever-growing intelligence. Alexei has grown tired of things he once enjoyed, finding everything to feel utterly trivial. It's in Stella leaving Alexei and telling him that he used to be sensitive and clever, but now he's just a monster, that Alexei realizes his quest to be happy has turned him into exactly that. Calling Spider-Man, Alexei gives him discs containing info to put an end to his own criminal empire, along with confirming that Alexei has known him to be Peter Parker for some time, but that it won't be any use where he's going. Feeling as if the whole world, good versus evil, love, to be utterly futile. Calculating that there's a 1.3 chance of an afterlife, Alexei favors those odds, seeking only oblivion. For Alexei's mind has become an inescapable pit of noise and knowledge, climbing to the very top of the same bridge as before, remembering when he could barely understand classical music. Alexei hears the polka music he used to love and gets an idea. Arriving to the same scientists that made him smart, Alexei hands them a complete guide to make him stupid, and before they conduct the procedure, Alexei stops them for one moment to make sure that they make him a little more stupid than before, just to be on the safe side. Days go by, and the Rhino is back to smashing through walls happier than ever, but stumbling across a book by Shakespeare, he vaguely remembers some other hymn, before dismissing it completely to smash into more walls, because that's something that makes the Rhino happy. Ending perhaps my favorite story about the Rhino. Alexei sure doesn't lead a totally good life by any means. Quite a miserable one, in fact. But again, it's a life Alexei never quite asked for either. However, it doesn't stop Alexei from trying to make the most out of life. Something we should all aspire to be like in some capacity. Think about it. This guy has to simmer in his own excrement sealed inside his suit for the rest of his life. And still, Rhino has lines he won't cross, people he'll always look out for, and memories to be made. Because deep down, the Rhino is still a person when all is said and done. Not just a dumb Rhino that bursts through walls. I just felt like that had to be said. Have a good day.
I can't stop the loneliness. こらえきれず悲しみが止まら
And check out some of these guys too while you're at it. Okay, bye!